Amnesty International says Twitter is not doing enough to protect women and non-binary users from online violence and abuse. Around 40% of women Twitter users experience abuse, and among those, Amnesty has found, South African women are often subjected to intimidation or harassment on the platform. For more on this, we are now joined by the Media and Communications Officer at Amnesty International, Genevieve Kintel. A very good evening to you, Genevieve. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to The Full View.
Evening to you and evening to your viewers.
Well, even though Twitter may claim that they have made some progress, like increasing the amount of information available through their help center and transparency reports, while also launching, I suppose, new public awareness campaigns and expanding the scope of their hateful conduct policy, it clearly isn't enough, is it?
Absolutely not. And, you know, one of our biggest issues with the platform is, and what we're actually calling for, is more transparency. We're looking for more transparency in terms of country-specific reports on abuse. We don't actually know how many South African women how many of their tweets that are being reported are going through Twitter, what their moderating is like. You know, every country has its own context. We have our own languages. Is there a country-specific moderating team that is looking at South Africa, understands the context and the languages, and so can take down abusive tweets? Because some Twitter users find that you can report a tweet and then Twitter says it doesn't go against our policy.
Right.
But within the context, you know, if you're looking at the South African context, we know it's quite abusive. It might not be abusive in another country. So how are they moderating these things?
And Amnesty asked women who experienced online abuse and did not necessarily report such abuse. And the general response that you got was that it was not worth the effort. I mean, this could be a multiplicity of reasons, one of which is the lack of action taken, and some women don't even know how or who to report the abuse. Surely the laxity to take action is a huge letdown for women, isn't it?
Absolutely, because all you can do is report the tweet and hope that you get a response from Twitter.
True.
And so what a lot of women are actually doing now are censoring themselves, especially on really hot topics, you know, when it comes to politics, law, big issues in South Africa. A lot of women are having to think, okay, what am I going to tweet about that I'm going to get the less abuse over? And, you know, there's a fine line between freedom of speech and hate speech. And on Twitter, we're saddling that fine line a lot of the time.
Well, would you categorically say that social media companies in general are complicit in the perpetuation of online abuse against women by placing privacy concerns above protecting women from threats, by not sharing the information of accounts that were harassing women? There are, of course, Genevieve, those abusers who hide behind fake accounts and through hidden identities continuously abuse women. Surely these social media companies can do better in terms of augmenting users' authentication processes.
Absolutely, Simpiwe, and this is why we need transparency from these companies, transparency on how they monitor their social media platforms, how they monitor the abuse, how much abuse, and country-specific as well, like we said earlier. You know, we have also spoken about the fact that there needs to be more regulation. Like we said, we're not trying to hamper anyone's freedom of speech, but there's surely a fine line between freedom of speech and hate speech. And it can't be profit over human rights.
Are you at all impressed with the strides taken to curb misinformation and fake news on social media?
We're looking at it. I know that during the July unrest, some tweets and that were taken down, but it still isn't enough. And this is what we're saying to Twitter. It's not enough. And it's the same on other social media platforms. More needs to be done, and we need more transparency.
So have you engaged Twitter on this particular instance, and what are they saying?
So we did send the report to Twitter, and they did respond saying that they are doing everything they can. They feel we haven't put everything into our report. They've put controls in place to help people. But again, we're saying that's not enough. We want more transparency on their moderating, on how many tweets are being reported and country-specific tweets. And that's why we keep harping on that we need more transparency. It's not just about putting easy user policy in.
You know, Genevieve, we've had this conversation for years now, and it seems that, Twitter has continuously failed to provide effective remedies for the real harm and the impact its platform has caused women and or marginalized groups. So if this goes on unabated, so what's the next step? Would punitive measures or sanctions be placed on Twitter and, in general, social media companies which fail to protect its users?
Amnesty International has already called for governments to put in legislation or regulation on social media companies. And, we will continue to hold companies such as Twitter accountable. We'll continue to do our Twitter scorecard reports and continue to highlight when things are not changing. We gave 10 recommendations in 2020. Only one recommendation has been fully implemented. And so we will keep putting pressure on Twitter to make sure that these recommendations are implemented and that we have the transparency and a abuse-free platform, hopefully. And probably not completely abuse-free, but at least with more moderating on it.
All right, Genevieve, lovely chatting to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
All right, that was Genevieve Quintal. She's the Media and Communications Officer for Amnesty International South Africa, and she's just been commenting about the report that they've collated with regards to Twitter having failed to protect its women and non-binary